If you grew up watching Star Trek, you probably dreamed of a future where you could step into a transporter and beam to anywhere in the universe. But some recent footage has people wondering if secret teleportation technology already exists today. December 2019. It's just after Christmas in the small community of Porter, north of Houston, Texas. A man is heading out alone on what seems like a normal Lone Star evening. But his doorbell is about to catch something extraordinary. The motion sensor records the man as he exits the front door and strolls casually down the walkway. But as he turns towards the driveway, he freezes momentarily and suddenly vanishes. Watch that again. And pay close attention to the ball of light that shoots up to the sky as he disappears. Did we just see an act of teleportation? Journalist MJ Banias, who reports on the Unexplained, says it wouldn't be the first reported case.
Cultures and religions have been talking about the ability to travel great distances in a short period of time for generations. In Jewish Kabbalah, rabbis and ascetics could pray and meditate and enter a holy state where they would be able to perform a sort of teleportation act.
Let's teleport back from ancient Israel to modern Georgia. And this internet classic, a high-speed pursuit shot from a police dash cam in 1997.
Police officer is hot on the tail of someone who stole a car and is trying to chase him down. After a bunch of maneuvers on the road, in some bizarre twist, the car thief takes a left turn and disappears through a fence.
Lieutenant Wayne Daniels was at the wheel during this perplexing event.
When it all occurred, it happened so fast. I figured the fence would wrap him up, he'd be in a big old cocoon, but yet the fence was still standing in front of me and keeping me closed off from getting inside the yard. I had no idea to begin with how a car could get through a 10-foot chain link fence.
And just recently, we've seen headlines reporting that teleportation is now a matter of science, at least on the subatomic level.
So the idea has been around since Einstein. We've known that it's possible to teleport at least photons. And even more recently, scientists have been able to use quantum entanglement to teleport larger structures.
Now, based on some physics calculations, it's thought it would require the energy an entire city uses for a year to teleport a human being. But that hasn't stopped people from believing that advanced teleportation tech exists in secret. So do these videos prove it? Let's turn to our experts. First, Michael Primo examines the doorbell video.
So I've analyzed many Ring camera video recordings, but one thing that they all have in common is that they use a high level of what's called visual compression. So I employed what's called macro block analysis as well as motion vector analysis. These tests reveal that the encoder was not documenting new pixel information for 30 frames. It is entirely possible that this is encoder error. So there's several different reasons as to why this occurred at this specific point in time. The first is there was a drop in the internet connection to which the camera was not transmitting information to the cloud to actually document those frames. The second is simply camera malfunction.
So the glitching doorbell didn't capture teleportation in the act. But how did that car in the police video seemingly teleport to the other side of the fence? After some investigation, Lieutenant Daniels believes he solved the puzzle.
On most fence, when you set the poles, you put the fence on the outside of the poles so that it protects anyone from going through the fence into a yard. This particular fence was set on the back side of the post so that when the car hit the fence, the aluminum ties that hold the fence to the poles popped loose. The fence swung open like a garage door, and before the dust could settle, the fence had done come straight back down in front of me.
So our verdict on both of these videos? The anomaly of the teleporting Texan can be explained by a faulty camera. And the mystery of the vanishing Georgia bandit can be explained by a faulty fence. However, a recent experiment in 2017 by Chinese researchers did manage to teleport the quantum state of a photon to a satellite 870 miles in orbit. Perhaps the days of beam me up, Scotty, could be on the horizon. November 2015. It appears to be business as usual at a hospital in China's Hubei province as a 53-year-old man prepares to undergo a medical procedure. A monitor is showing the live feed from inside the patient on the table. It is then that what they are looking at and trying to extract is revealed. Check this out. The object remarkably resembles an egg, white, oval, and nestled perfectly inside the patient's stomach. And if it is an egg, what's going to hatch?
There's a long-standing idea that exists within the UFO community that aliens from another world will often abduct people and implant eggs inside them for the purpose of breeding some future alien hybrid race. We do also see incidents where people claim to have alien implants inside them. There was a famous doctor who performed surgeries on people who claimed to have been abducted by aliens and implanted with strange objects inside their body.
Many patients who claim to have alien implants say the objects were metal, possibly used for tracking or monitoring. But this egg-like object certainly looks organic. Let's see how our experts diagnose the situation. Our zoologist, Roxy Furman, has seen a lot of strange, natural occurring phenomena, but she's never seen anything quite like this.
It looks like it could be an egg, but later on they actually have the object and they've kind of dissected it and cut it into slices. It doesn't have any of the physical properties of an egg in terms of the layers. It looks artificial, maybe some sort of gelatin or something.
And where this thing was found is also key.
It's very unlikely that something like that could grow in a human stomach. It's full of different acids and chemical compounds that break down food, not nurture growth. So it's highly unlikely that something would be in there thriving and growing.
Professor of biology Floyd Hayes thinks there is a much more down-to-earth explanation for this man's condition.
So it appears to me that this is basically masses of fatty tissue that accumulate. They're relatively soft. They are benign. When they grow large like this, they could be problematic in that they could press against various organs. They could cause pain.
After the analysis, we did some digging, and it turns out this isn't the first of its kind. In 2013, a 62-year-old man had a similar growth removed at a hospital in Washington, D.C. The mass measured about 3.34 inches at its midline and weighed about ½ a pound, making it the largest specimen of its kind.
We're not really certain why these appear. There's at least one gene that has been found to be associated with the growth. There's also some evidence that they may result from traumatic injuries.
So, our verdict. This is a biological phenomenon, a mixture of fat and tissue that grew naturally in this man's bodily fluid. But this doesn't completely disprove the accounts of aliens implanting human hosts. Just not this one. This video first appeared in 2013. We see a 747 jumbo jet coming in for a landing on a hazy day. The camera zooms out to show that whoever is filming is behind the airport security fence. Suddenly, from the top right, another plane comes screaming into frame right at the first plane. Watch that again. It banks left, just narrowly avoiding the landing plane.
Pilots are always trained to pull to the right. When you pull to the right, the oncoming plane will pull to the right and you'll miss each other. In this case, this pilot here makes an error. He's pulling to the left while this plane dramatically pulls to the right. So as they're passing each other, this plane is actually flying closer to this plane.
If this is real, it wouldn't be the first near miss.
At an airport in Barcelona in 2014, a Russian plane was coming in for a landing when a plane from Argentina taxied on the runway in front of it. The Russian pilots were able to pull up and perform a maneuver known as a go-around, and they were able to land safely. In 2017, an Air Canada flight had to abort its landing when it accidentally almost landed on a taxiway instead of a runway.
That taxiway had 5 other full planes waiting to take off. And had the pilot not pulled up, it could have killed more than 1,000 people. Fortunately, there are several fail-safes in place to avoid such collisions.
There's a collision avoidance system that each aircraft has. So when an aircraft gets too close to another, an alarm goes off and lets the pilots know that they're close to another aircraft. When an aircraft is coming in for a landing, however, the pilot has very little time to react.
But even if the traffic collision avoidance system, or TCAS, fails, air traffic control should see if one pilot is flying in the wrong airspace before it's too late.
It's incredibly unlikely that a room of air traffic controllers, as well as their computer systems, would make an error where a plane is taking off where an airplane should be landing. It's very rare that an incident like this would occur.
The Traffic Collision Avoidance System, or TCAS, is mandated on all commercial aircraft with more than 30 passenger seats. It has saved countless lives, though near-miss incidents or even mid-air collisions, while extremely rare, do still occur. But before you go canceling your flight to Tahiti, let's make sure this video is legit. Aviation expert Lieutenant Tim McMillan says some planes are capable of such evasive maneuvers.
Fighter planes are designed to do this, down to the fact that they can have controllable thrust vectoring, where they're actually moving their engines around that allow them to do some pretty bizarre maneuvers.
However, it would be hard for these passenger planes without such equipment and a tail height as tall as a 6-story building to stay aloft.
When you're looking at large commercial aircraft like this, there's something called the angle of attack, which is the angle at which the wind hits the wings of the aircraft that help it generate lift.
Most airplanes require an angle of attack to stay 16 degrees or below to maintain a smooth airfoil effect to stay aloft. More than that creates too much turbulence above the wing.
When you see both of these aircraft turn in such an extreme manner like that, that would alter what is actually keeping the plane afloat. It would alter it to such an extreme that both of those planes would crash.
So the sudden changes in trajectory seem like a big red flag for the authenticity of this video. And even if an event like this happened without a disaster, it would be nearly impossible to cover it up.
If this was a real event, this would be an absolute catastrophic breakdown in all of the safety protocols that are put in place to avoid accidents. It's just almost virtually impossible to think that something like this could happen at any major or even a smaller airport and it not come out. I can say with just about absolute certainty that this is going to be some type of CGI that, to whoever's credit, is pretty well done.
So we tracked down the source of the video, and it turned out to be some CGI fun created by a video artist named Minnie Sirbis, whose work we've examined before.
I take it as a compliment that people might think that these videos are real, because one of the things I like to do is make these videos appear completely photorealistic, but then put an element of impossibility in it and just see how people react to it.
Minnie never intended to dupe anyone, but plenty of people have commented and shared this video thinking the incident really happened. So always be careful what you repost. In a Montreal park in December of 2012, a lucky bird watcher spots a majestic eagle soaring above and begins to film. As a distracted father lets his young toddler play in the grass nearby, the camera catches an unthinkable encounter. The eagle swoops in, bares its talons, and picks up the child.
Oh,
Oh! The cameraman runs to the rescue, but thankfully, after several feet, the bird drops the child back onto the grass. Now watch those talons again in slow-mo. The eagle is able to lift the toddler 6 feet in the air before it lets go.
oh.
The internet has understandably gone wild for this video. Could super strong eagles actually be preying on children in Canada? Before you scoff, check out this video from 2018. It shows another eagle swooping down and trying to pick up an 8-year-old girl in Kyrgyzstan before it was pulled off by some onlookers. Fossil evidence shows that our early ancestors were preyed upon by large birds like this.
There are Neanderthal bones that have been found under the nest of an eagle that also indicate that throughout the history of hominins, we have had to fear these birds, that they could possibly swoop down and pick up our children.
And the Maori people of New Zealand had a legend about a massive bird known as the puakai that would carry off their children. We now know it was based on a real eagle.
The Haast eagle, which weighed upwards of 40 pounds and is thought to be one of the largest eagles that ever existed, even though it's now extinct, it's worked its way into the folklore of the Maori because it did prey on humans as well.
So we know these types of eagle attacks have happened in the past, and that Kyrgyzstan video shows they still do. So do humans need to once again fear our children being carried off by birds of prey? Or has this Canadian video been manipulated? Our experts are on the case.
Based on the location, it's likely that the raptor is a golden eagle, but look at the coloration across its feathers. It's completely different to how you'd expect a golden eagle to look, which has every feather is like a different shade of gold.
The size of the toddler is also grounds for skepticism.
They're capable of carrying about 5 pounds. They're known to carry small animals, fish, reptiles. A human toddler about 2-3 years old would probably weigh closer to 20-25 pounds, so it's unlikely to be something that they could carry.
So it's either some massive eagle thought to be extinct, or there's something else going on.
There's points in the video where the bird of prey seems to change in scale. Sweeps down slightly in front of the trees where it looks quite small, but by the point where it's down near the toddler, its wingspan looks taller than the adult human being. So that led me to believe that this is some sort of CGI raptor that someone's created artificially.
We can measure the shadow and light information in the video to determine if something has been added. And in this particular case, there's a red color that comes down from the shadow information that was recorded by the objects that were inserted, and it's displaying a different originating light source than the rest of the shadow information.
See how these red and green lines intersect? If the video was legit, they'd all be parallel.
They essentially choreographed this in the park with computer-generated images of the bird as well as the child.
So, upon further review, this video was a hoax. But that Kyrgyzstan attack supports a 2019 report that bird attacks on humans appear to be on the rise as people encroach on their natural habitats. Pretty wild stuff. In September 2019, the fate of MH370 continues to confound investigators. The majority of the search has taken place over the ocean, but British video producer Ian Wilson suddenly has a thought when revisiting details of this case. What if the lost Boeing 777 had actually crashed on land in an area where it would be hard to find, such as a remote jungle? In his free time, Ian begins pouring through satellite maps of the possible flight paths, concentrating on the rainforests of Southeast Asia.
I traced the arc that runs from North Asia down to the southern Indian Ocean. I was hoping I would see like a load of crushed trees.
After days of scrolling without any luck, Ian suddenly stumbles upon something unmistakable. An object shaped exactly like an airplane, deep in the Cambodian jungle 60 miles west of Phnom Penh.
If you really go into the 3D view, it looks as though the plane is laying up against a mountain. It's almost at a 45-degree angle.
Now, in the years since the disappearance, airplane pieces suspected to be from MH370 have washed ashore all over the Indian Ocean, but only a small number have actually been confirmed to be from this exact plane. Some reject those findings and the whole idea that the plane crashed in the ocean.
Based upon how much fuel was on board and the possible directions this aircraft could go, the search area could be anywhere within a very large radius of the ocean, or in some remote area in Southeast Asia.
Ian and his brother Jackie decided to pool their money and trek out to that spot in the Cambodian jungle themselves.
The fact that it linked up with the last known position of the plane on this arc, that's enough to go and check it out.
But it proves more treacherous than they ever expected, even to their local guides.
Halfway through, these guys turn around and say, look, we're going back, we can't go any further. We got to a huge waterfall that they couldn't get past.
The brothers eventually have to return home empty-handed. Planes vanish more often than you would think. Since MH370, 7 other aircraft have gone missing around the world. But could Ian's discovery at least put to rest the questions about this notorious disaster? Our experts take the stick. First, aviation expert Lieutenant Tim McMillan determines whether a plane that crashed in a jungle would appear like the image Ian found on the satellite map.
It looks very much like an airplane just sat down in the middle of the wilderness. I would not expect to see a big commercial plane like a Boeing 777 be able to land in that condition and not be destroyed.
But even if somehow the plane managed to stay intact, McMillan doubts that this image is a Boeing 777.
Just based on the scale that we have from these satellite images, this object that looks very plane-like is about 100 feet too short for a Boeing 777.
So might this be part of the natural topography that Ian just mistook for an airplane?
We know it's not snow because it would have melted, and there's no snow in Cambodia at that altitude. It's in the middle of a tropical jungle. And there's no indication that this is a random rock formation. It looks exactly like a plane.
But there are no telltale signs of a crash landing.
If this was a plane that had actually flown into this spot, we would see some kind of indication in the surrounding vegetation.
Mixed conclusion. Ian did locate a plane, just not on the jungle floor, but in the sky above it.
I think this is certainly not MH370, so it's another plane. And it's just happened to have been caught in this satellite image. This is something that happens, surprisingly often. It just means there happened to be one caught on camera at that time.
Our verdict. This is most likely a moving plane passing over Cambodia just as the satellite image was taken. But Ian and Jackie Wilson are still convinced that MH370 lies somewhere deep in the jungles there. Once they save up enough money, they say they are heading out on another expedition.